It's been said that there are two things in life that everyone has to face: paying taxes and death. I'd like to talk to you tonight about your choices should you become incapacitated or facing decisions at end-of-life care. Questions about medical care in the end of life are of concern, partly because of the growing ability of medical technology to prolong life. Many people want to avoid extending personal and family suffering by artificially prolonging life if they are in a vegetative state or when there's no hope of recovery. Others want everything medically possibly to be done. The best way for you to retain control in these situations is to record your preferences for medical care in advance and share your situation or your decisions with your physicians, loved ones, and clergy. This lets family and caregivers know the types of treatment you want and don't want, the way you would like to be cared for as you age, and who should make decisions for you if you can't make decisions for yourself. Most importantly, it takes an enormous amount of stress off your family, since they won't have to make these often difficult decisions about your care. Increase your own peace of mind and provide it to your family by explaining what health care you would prefer if severely injured or terminally ill, and then share these preferences before a medical crisis happens. The preferences can be clarified by thinking about your views on death, being totally dependent on the care of others, your family finances, or conditions that would make life intolerable for you, and how artificial life support would affect that dying process. You should then discuss these views with your family, and if you have any questions about any of the procedures that might be used, you can speak to your physician. Once you determine your preferences, you can document them in either a living will or a durable power of attorney for health care. The durable power of attorney for health care is a signed legal document, and it authorizes another person to make medical decisions on your behalf in case you lose that decision capability. A living will is a document that summarizes your personal preferences for future medical care. And a living will usually doesn't take effect unless you are terminally ill without chance of recovery, and it outlines any desire to withhold heroic measures, so either no CPR, no feeding tubes, those types of things. A study published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine in 2014 looked at adults who did and did not have an advance directive. There were 7,900 respondents to the survey, and 26% had an advance directive. The lack of awareness was cited as the most common reason why a person did not have an advance directive. And so researchers were interested in what factors or barriers there were to completing that advance directive. The research showed that the people that were older in age with higher levels of education and income had a greater likelihood of completing the advance directive. People who had completed an advance directive were also more likely to have a chronic disease and have access to health care. The right to refuse medical care actually came about in about 1976. Prior to that time, really any legal cases were involving Jehovah's Witness because of their religious beliefs, and so they were covered under the First Amendment of religious freedom. In 1975, Karen Ann Quinlan was a patient. She was 21 years old, and she suffered episodes of loss of breathing. She was intoxicated and had been taking alcohol and drugs. She ended up being comatose and stayed in that state for a year. It was a persistent vegetative state, and her father then asked to have her taken off of the ventilator. Initially that request was denied, but it went to the New Jersey Supreme Court, And they ruled that the patient had a right, or the father had a right to ask that for his daughter because she was incompetent and wasn't able to speak for herself. So she was taken off the ventilator and she was able to breathe on her own, and she was kept alive for 9 more years with artificial nutrition and hydration. This case really focused on treatment refusal and the person's right to die. A second case that is in the record is from 1990, so a few years later. This was Terry Shibo. She had suffered cardiopulmonary arrest, and she was in a persistent vegetative state and was being fed through a feeding tube for her nutrition and hydration. And after 8 years, she didn't have any neurologic recovery, so she stayed in that vegetative state for 8 years. Her husband, who was also her guardian, requested that the feeding tube be removed, but her parents objected, and so the case went to court. The judge determined that there was clear and convincing evidence that she would not want to be kept alive in this state. And so despite several attempts by her parents, the feeding tube was removed, and she did end up dying. So both of these cases really brought about a lot of attention to the need to have a plan for yourself. So again, that's where the need to have an advance directive completed is very important. As you note, in both of these cases, these were young ladies. A lot of times people think that advance directives are only for those people who are older, maybe terminally ill. But these were both young ladies who were very alive and active until this point when they had a tragic event. So I would like to talk to you about completing these advance directives, about thinking about what your wishes would be, and taking the time to really look at your preferences. You can think about your views on death. Do you want to be totally dependent on the care of others? Think about your family finances and what kind of conditions that would make life intolerable for you if you had to have artificial life support, and if that would affect your dying process. You should discuss these views with your family. It's very important so your family knows what your wishes are, and so if you ask one of them to be your durable power of attorney for health care, that they understand what you want, and so they aren't making that decision for you. You've already given them the information that they need. The most important thing that you can do for yourself and your family is to talk openly about your wishes and theirs, and then share those thoughts with your healthcare provider. With Thanksgiving just around the corner, it might be a good time to have that conversation with family members and make sure that everyone knows what wishes you would like to have.